Hello, hello. Cobra Roll, hello. Gabby, hello. Let's see. All right. No problems getting on tonight for some reason. That's good. We'll just wait a minute here and see if we have more coming in before we get started. So, I'll say this now and I'll say it again later. If you have a direct question or comment for me regarding what we're talking about tonight, put it in all caps. I won't be offended and think that you're yelling at me. But put it in all caps, and that way I will see it on the screen a bit easier. So, yes, BB-8. I don't think that tonight I will show much of my Star Wars collection because I want to talk more about the movies and the books and so forth. So, let's see. I'm going to give it like one more minute and then I'll start. So, is everyone here? Is everyone here a Star Wars fan? Because if you're not, probably in the wrong place. But Star Wars now falls under the Disney umbrella, and so perfect to talk about Star Wars. I've loved Star Wars ever since I was a little kid, and I'm old enough that I was standing in line in 1977 for seeing Star Wars in the theater. And still, more than the movie, I remember the extremely long line for waiting to get into the theater to see that. But boy, I was 11 years old, I guess. I had just turned 11. All right. Well, I'm going to start. I had run a poll on Twitter. Not a lot of people responded to it, like 30 people. And the question that I asked is Leia Organa a princess? And the reason that I asked this question is because I watched a live stream of someone else that I like to watch. And quite often the guy has said that that Leia is not a princess because her planet's blown up. So she can't be a princess. And I come from a different viewpoint than that. And I will say that I've spent the last 2 days marathoning all of the Star Wars, starting with Rogue One and going all the way up to The Last Jedi. And so I'm going to base my opinions on whether Leia is a princess or not on the movies themselves, and also just on my own opinion. But the idea that this fella is putting out, which I think is an interesting idea, is since she doesn't have a planet to rule, how can she be a princess? But princess, king, any queen, these things are titles. If you go into the fantasy world, even go into what is it? The Towers, The Hobbit, all of those. Um, they have a king in that story who has no kingdom, but they still refer to him as a king. I like, better than Tolkien, I like the Robert Jordan Wheel of Time books. And in those books, they have the King of Malkier. Well, Malkier hasn't been a kingdom for, I guess, hundreds of years. But they still have the king. The title still carries through and the lineage still carries through. So, so you can technically say she has no throne. She has no country to rule, in this case a planet to rule. But the title still remains. And so for that reason, I still see Leia as a princess. And now she's a Disney princess. Now I went to the movies, and in the movies, she is still referred to as princess after Alderaan has been blown up. Han Solo still refers to her as princess. C-3PO, on numerous occasions after the destruction of Alderaan, calls her princess. Now, the reason I bring up C-3PO and why I give his word so much weight is because C-3PO is a protocol droid. A protocol droid. He's a guy that knows about etiquette. He knows the protocols. And so if a protocol droid is still calling her princess, then that's it. She's still a princess. When you get to The Force Awakens, in the opening scene, I say this guy's name, but Tekka, the old fella that Poe Dameron is meeting with at the very beginning, he says that the general wants me to get this from you or something like that, but his order from the general. And Tekka says, the general? To me, she is royalty. And Poe Dameron says, she is that. So even that late in the trilogies, into the latest, newest trilogies, still acknowledging Leia as royalty, as princess. She has no throne to rule, but the title remains. And so, for me, she has to be a Disney princess. Okay, well, that covers that part of it. Let's see if anyone has Cobra Roll. Did they not call her just General Organa in The Force Awakens? In The Force Awakens, yes. I just got done, like I said, I marathoned all of these movies over the last 2 days. And in Force Awakens, she is just General Organa. I don't think that matters as far as the point that I'm making, because it was established in the movie before that she's still royalty. And they were making that point. The whole premise of well, no, you're saying Force Awakens. Yeah, Force Awakens. No, that's at the very beginning of Force Awakens. That's what I mean. At the very beginning of that, Tekka, if I'm saying his name right, acknowledges her as royalty. So yes, from the very beginning of The Force Awakens, she's royalty. However, throughout the movie, they do call her General Organa because that is what her current role is, the more important role. But the title remains. Okay. All right. So, and I'm willing to hear any arguments for her not being a princess at that date. But if you're going to use the movies, which are canon, well, she's princess. There's no way around it. She is royalty. Okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about is how I watch the Star Wars movies. Um, this is not my own idea. I have seen it from other people, but it was a way that I had come up with, and so when I saw other people were doing it the same way, I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. So let's talk about how I watch the Star Wars movies when I'm watching them in marathon. And I really suggest this order of the movies for people who know nothing about Star Wars. Maybe for, you know, the younger generation coming up that knows nothing of Star Wars. I really recommend this order of watching the films because it puts a whole different feel to it. You would have to watch it yourself in the order I'm saying to understand what I mean. But boy, when I got to that point and it was like this, boy, and everything just snap, 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 snap. It just works in such a good way. So anyway, let's get into how I do it. The first one I watch is Rogue One. Because that's where the story starts. I'm not going to go into explaining these movies because if you're here and you know something about Star Wars. But Rogue One is where it begins because the opening crawl of A New Hope in just a couple sentences is this whole movie. So this is where you start. And this movie ends exactly where A New Hope picks up. So start with Rogue One and throw that over there. Then, of course, we go to A New Hope. Like I said, goes right from Rogue One right into New Hope. Boom, boom, boom. You get the whole story of Luke Skywalker. You meet the princess. Alderaan is blown up. You meet Darth Vader. All the characters introduced that we all know and love so much now. And that is A New Hope. After A New Hope, which is number 4 now in the way that they do, then I move on to number 5. And if you're seeing these titles, the titles are in the Finnish. And but of course the English, number 5, The Empire Strikes Back. So right into New Hope, into this. Now, in this movie, this is where we find out at the end that Darth Vader is Luke's father. So, this is now where I change direction. And now I go into flashback. And I pick up with number 1. What is it? Phantom Menace. I pick up with this movie. Now, there are people that will tell you to skip this movie. In fact, when I put it on, Anne says, "Is this the one with the little kid?" And I said, "Yeah." She says, "Why do we got to start with that one?" So, a lot of people don't like the Phantom Menace, but I argue that it has its place in the canon. It's showing the origin story of Anakin, which I think is important. And not only that, I think it has one of the best lightsaber scenes in the whole group of Star Wars movies. The battle between Darth Maul and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. A brilliant scene. So, but what you're seeing now that we know that Darth Vader is Luke's father, I like to take it into flashback to where we see now Anakin Skywalker growing up. So, of course, we go into the Clone Wars, and I don't have a lot to say about the Clone Wars. It's probably my least favorite of the prequels, and mainly because the CGI just wasn't ready. Um, if they had used more, um, I forget what the term is, practical effects, instead of having all these CGI clone soldiers, and if they had had actual people, I think it would have been so much better. But at some point, it just turns into watching the cartoon, and so it loses it for me on that aspect. But anyway, I still watch it because there's important information here. I think that every one of these movies, that new information that's important to the story is given. And in the Clone Wars, you really see how Palpatine is manipulating the government in order to bring about the empire that he wants. Okay, so after Clone Wars, then we go to Revenge of the Sith. For me personally, this is my favorite movie of the prequels. I am not a Star Wars movie hater. I like the prequels for what they are, the original movies for what they are, and I like the new ones too. But brilliant. For me, I just love this movie because you're seeing the whole thing of Anakin embracing his hatred and his anger and becoming Darth Vader. And I like the way that story is told for his transformation into that. So now we're back to Darth Vader. Now we can go back into Part 6, Return of the Jedi. And not a whole lot that I have to say about this one, but yeah, Return of the Jedi. Well, I guess I will say that the whole scene at the end, my favorite parts of Return of the Jedi is the moments with Palpatine, Vader, and Luke Skywalker, and all of that interaction with him being the Palpatine trying to seduce him into the dark side, and then finally the redemption of Anakin. So yeah, Jedi Returns. So where do we go from here? Well, there's only one place to go, and that is into The Force Awakens, and after that, The Last Jedi. And I'm really not going to expound on these at all, other than to say I am not a Last Jedi hater. The Last Jedi did not ruin my childhood. To tell you the truth, I liked the direction that they took Luke Skywalker in this movie. And it's because of these stacks here that help form my opinion on that. Luke Skywalker is not the little kid that he was, the teenager and the young man just learning about the Force. I don't know if it's stressed strongly enough in the movies, but he was researching the Jedi. He was trying to learn how to be the best Jedi he could possibly be. And in the process of his research, what he found was that the Jedi were just as bad as the Sith, just in a different way. And so that's why he turned his back on the Jedi. Now, I'm of the school that I would really like to see a gray Jedi come about in the last movie, or in the future, in future movies that they might do, because when you really look at what balance is using both the good and the bad in a way that is for good. if, if that comes out clear enough. Yin and yang. Uh, Boy, let's cross the streams here a little bit and go to Star Trek. There was the episode where Kirk is beamed up in the transporter, and in the process of being beamed up, he is split into his good side and his bad side. And the outcome of the episode is that they cannot possibly live as only half of what their essence is. It takes both the good and the bad to create the total human being that is at its most powerful. And I really think that that's what they need to do with Star Wars. And okay, now I have two people asking me where is Solo. I actually did not buy the Solo movie because every one of these movies that I just showed you, I am going to be giving to my son, because not a one of them will play in the United States. So I have stopped buying DVDs and Blu-ray here in Finland, because it's a waste of money for me at this point. But Solo, where does Solo, I guess, and someone give their opinion there. I suppose Solo falls before Rogue One. Yeah? I guess it falls before Rogue One. There was another thing that I had never noticed when on the Battle of Hoth, that the different fighters that when they're fighting on Hoth are going by Rogue 2, Rogue 3, Rogue 4. I didn't hear if there was a Rogue One. I guess Rogue One used that as their reverse callback for what they did there. So I guess that answers, I hope that answers why there is no Solo movie in my list, because I don't own it. So, and that's why. Okay. Any other questions? Has anyone used this method of watching the movies in this order? I'd be interested to know. And if you have a different order, because there's different orders that people have for watching these. Hey, MLJ. Thanks for stopping in. Nope, never. Okay. I would suggest give it a try sometime in this order and see the effect of it. Because when you go back with the flashback and then you come back into 6, it puts this different feel into it. It makes Vader even more sympathetic in 6 than if you're watching them in the other order. Disney Buffins, thanks for stopping in. Yeah, you only watch them in the order they were made. But if I can entice you in any way to try this order that I laid out, give it a go. Give it a go. You might find it interesting, especially if you're marathoning them, because the way that they flow when you're doing that. All right. Now, okay. Yeah, I started with the order. So I'll just say again really quick what the order of the movies is that I recommend watching them. So it's Rogue One, episodes 4 and 5, then skip back to the prequels, 1, 2, and 3, then come back to 6, and then follow the new movies, the Rey movies in the normal order. But putting the prequel between 5 and 6 puts the movies into a flashback, and then when you come back into 6, where Vader is now being redeemed, it makes Vader much more sympathetic in that movie when you watch it in that order. All right. If you got here late, if you want, you can go back and watch the replay, and I go through the order and give my thoughts on some of the different movies for that. So, all right. And like I said at the beginning, this isn't my idea. I had come up with this idea, and then online I found that other people were doing it in the exact same order. So I saw that as a bit of validation. So it's worth trying if you like Star Wars. All right. Okay. Now, what I would like to do, I'm going to get into some opinion stuff here, I suppose. A lot of people were confused, I think, by The Last Jedi movie. And I think that confusion is warranted. I think a lot of things were thrown at people in that movie that they didn't expect, characters they didn't know. And the thing of it is, unfortunately, and I'm going to say unfortunately, is that the Star Wars world has opened up so much now that it's more than just the movies. And I think that something gets lost because of that. Books, Star Wars books, have become a big industry. I mean, they've been a big industry for a long time, but now when Disney got a hold of it, they created the new canon. And you're going to find things in the books that make the movies more understandable. So when you're reading the books, someone pops up on screen, and you're like, you've already got their backstory. So you understand what's going on with them. And they just don't pop up out of nowhere. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this briefly because I don't want to get too boring on this, but give some recommendations. And I'm going to go through these books in what I believe is their canon order. And I believe that all of the books I'm going to show you are canon books. Let's move Princess Leia out of the way. I can't put her up with the rest of my Disney princesses right now, but okay. Can I say one more time, we have some new people coming in. If you have any questions or comments for me, please put them in all caps. That way I'll be able to see them and know that that's a comment or a question directed at me, and make sure that I pay attention to it. Okay, so let's go through some of the books here. And this is the newest one that I've gotten, and it's called Queen's Shadow. And this book picks up after, well, that starts on Padme's like last week of being queen, and then the process of her becoming senator. For me, this book had no story whatsoever. So I would say pass on this book. They're really, I should say I might end up with some spoilers in here. Hopefully nothing that's too big of a spoiler. But the big takeaway from this book is that Padme tried to launch a campaign to free the slaves on Tatooine. So that's like the big discovery of this book. Other than that, this book was not that interesting to me. I kept waiting for the story to start, probably the same way that you're waiting for me to stop talking about this book. The story just never started. So, but a little bit of history on how Padme becomes senator. This book, and these books I think I have going in an order. This book I rather liked, Leia. This book is about a young Leia. I forget exactly how old, but I think like 13 or 14 maybe, but quite young. This book gives much information about Holdo, who becomes the leader of the resistance while Leia is in the coma. And so people, when they went to see The Last Jedi and Holdo pops up, purple-haired lady with basically no explanation. But I had read this book before, and so I knew the Holdo character. When she popped up, I knew exactly who she was. And that's one of the reasons why I say reading the books can give you some good information. But I like this one. It tells how how Leia gets her training to become a senator later on. And also, you see Crate. Am I saying that right? The rebel base that the Resistance went to at the end of The Last Jedi. And you see Crate in this book. So, if I remember correctly, this came out shortly before The Last Jedi came out. Okay, this was a book that I really enjoyed. Now, a lot of these books I've read so long, and I've read so many of them that I don't remember everything about them. But this book starts before Rogue One. It's called Star Wars Catalyst. And in here, you get the full story of Galen and his wife and their work for the Empire with the Kyber crystals and so forth and what they're doing. I really recommend reading this book. It's a real good way to get more information about what's going on in Rogue One as far as Galen goes. And so, Catalyst, Star Wars Catalyst Rogue One. Highly recommend that one. All right. I'm going to be honest with you and say this book is Star Wars Tarkin. I'll be honest with you and say I don't remember a lot about this book. But this book, from what I do remember, has Tarkin rising up in rank in the Empire and the things that he does and so forth. I remember that I liked the book when I read it. It's just been so long ago that I don't remember the whole storyline. But this one, like I said, I liked it. Read it. It's a good book. And like I said, all of these books. Thank you, BB-8. I'll take that as your endorsement of the Tarkin book as well. Okay, the next book is Thrawn. Thrawn was a character from the Legends, the books that became legend. When Disney took over, they rewrote the canon and said what's canon and what's not canon. And Thrawn, they made canon. I was so happy when they made Thrawn canon. So this book basically is telling where Thrawn came from and how he rose in the ranks, and that's basically the whole story from there. For those that don't know, Thrawn also is seen in the Clone Wars. And I was so happy when they added Thrawn. Boy, I would love to see Thrawn show up in the next Star Wars movie. That would be great. Okay. Again, all these books, as far as I know, are canon. And the next one is Star Wars: A New Dawn. And this is a story that is based on the, what is it called? The Rebels series. And it's basically how Canon and Hera Syndulla meet and how they become the team that you see on the cartoon series. So this was a fun read. Most of the Star Wars books I like. There's only been a few that I haven't, and most of the ones that I haven't liked have been the non-canon books. Exactly. BB-8 knows. He knows what it's about. All right, so not only did they give us the origin story of Thrawn, but they gave us Star Wars Thrawn alliances. This was a fun book for me. This book is told as the current story happening and also in flashbacks. But this story, basically Palpatine has put Thrawn and Vader together to work on a mission. And I haven't seen all of the Rebels series, and I haven't seen all of the Clone Wars animated series. So, but I understand that in those series, Anakin and Thrawn work together. And so you have flashbacks of Thrawn working with Anakin in the past, and then the story that runs present time of Thrawn working with Vader. A very fun book. It's also by Timothy Zahn. If you read the Thrawn book first and get an understanding of who Thrawn is, and then dive into this one, this is really worth your time to read. Okay. Canon. More canon. What is the, there's one of the movie talk shows, and what's the deal with canon? Here's the deal with canon. Okay, this book is Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad, and from what I understand, basically this is the story that's from the game, and it's just a story from the game as a story, as a book. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to play the game because I don't have a PlayStation 4. I only have a PlayStation 3. But maybe someday I'll get to play the game and go from there. Where did I buy all those books? From the bookstore or from Amazon. About Black Spire, which is of course Galaxy's Edge. And so I have that ordered, and when that comes in, I'll be reading that. All right, I don't know if we have lost the signal. I'm showing a lag here. I'm going to get up and look. Okay, let me know in the comments if we've lost the feed here. I'm not sure. Okay, well, are we still here? We're still here. Working. Okay. All right. Okay, good. On mine, for some reason it lags, so that's good. Okay. So I hope everyone saw everything for Inferno Squad. Okay, the next book, I don't think that this book is considered canon, but I highly recommend this book. Boy, if you can read this book, get this book. The book is called Star Wars from a Certain Point of View. And it's actually by I guess, how many? I don't know how many. There's 40 stories, and I guess there's as many authors, 40 different authors doing stories in this book. They're short stories. Some are shorter, some are longer than others. But we're back to from a certain point of view. So each of these stories are telling the events of episodes 4, 5, and 6. But they're telling them from the viewpoint of people in the background of the story. So not from the main character's views. Although there are some character views in here. For example, there's one story where Qui-Gon, as a Force ghost, comes back and is talking with Obi-Wan and teaching Obi-Wan things about the Force as a Force ghost. So that's nice. The creature that's in the garbage compactor, that pulls Luke underneath the water. We find out in the book that that's a female creature, and she's telling her story about why she's there on the Death Star. A very fun book. For the most part, I would say 90% of the stories, maybe even more, that are in this book, I really liked. So a certain point of... Will Wheaton from Star Trek Generations, he wrote one of the stories in here. So, again, highly recommended. If you can, get a hold of Star Wars from a certain point of view. I'd also be interested to hear, has anyone read any of these books that I'm mentioning here? Okay, the next 3 books I think should be required reading in order to have a better understanding of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. I will most likely reread all 3 of these books before going to see the next Star Wars movie, The Rise of Luke Skywalker, because these books may have some stuff in here. The first one is called Aftermath. The second one, they're all called Aftermath. First one is just called Star Wars Aftermath. The next one is called Aftermath Life Debt. And the last one is called Empire's End. And these books pick up right after the destruction of the second Death Star, the one where Palpatine is killed. And so some of the interesting things about these books is the cult groups that arise, the Vader worshippers, and so forth. Are some of these groups, are they the seeds for the what are they called? Knights of Ren. They could be. But these books also get into the long-term plan that Palpatine had, that if anything happened to him, that his mission would continue out in the far reaches of space to the unknown regions. And is that where Snoke came from? The unknown regions. There seems to be some clues in these books. It's hard to know for sure, but these are really worth a read. I will say that the first one, Aftermath, for me and for a lot of people, it was a difficult read. The story's there and everything, but the writing style that Chuck Wendig, that's the name of the author, Chuck Wendig, his writing style in this first book was very difficult to read. And I heard in some of the reading groups that I participated in, a lot of people were complaining about it for this book. The next two books, much easier to read. Much easier to read. And by the way, in these three books, one of the main characters is one of the pilots that you see in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. I believe his name is Wexley. It's been a long time since I read these. That's why I need to read them again before the next movie. So the character you see here, you see in the two latest films as well. All right. So let's move on from there. Maybe we'll do this stack. And okay, the next one is Last Shot, and this is a story about Han Solo and Lando Calrissian. And this book has, if I can show you this, because it's a book about Lando and Solo, you can take your choice of a Solo cover, or you can turn it around and you can have a Lando Calrissian cover. So it's up to you whether you want it to be a Han Solo book or a Lando Calrissian book. It came with the Solo side up, and that's the way the cover was bent already, and so that's the way that I've kept it. This wasn't my favorite read. It was okay. If you like Han Solo, if you like Lando Calrissian, give it a read. But it's not on my must-read list. Okay, this book is on my must-read list. This is Bloodline by Claudia Gray, and this book basically is once the New Republic has been formed, and I don't think it's too much of a spoiler. Let me look at the back here a second. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that this book is about what happens when the population finds out that Darth Vader is Senator Organa's father. This book also has the birth of Kylo Ren in it. I'm not going to say more about this book because this is a book that if you haven't read, you should read this book. No question about it. This one's another one I need to read again. A lot of information in this book, a good story, and you're going to find out more about the origins of the First Order, the New Republic, a lot of stuff in here. Oh, and go back to what we were talking about at the very beginning about whether Leia is a princess or not. Her title is very important to one aspect of this book in here. So the fact that she is the princess, and this happens long after any of that, but it's important to this in this book that she has the title of princess. Read this book. That's all I'm trying to say. All right. Okay, we just have a few more books here and then we'll stop for tonight. The next book is Phasma. Phasma is basically the Boba Fett of the new generation of Star Wars. She has very little screen time, but she's very flashy. This book is by Delilah Dawson, and she tells a really good story. This book gives the whole origin story of Phasma. It explains where her silver stormtrooper uniform comes from, which is a very interesting story. I like Delilah Dawson stuff. So I would highly recommend reading this book, especially if you like the character in the new movies, if you like Phasma, and you want to learn a little bit more about, well, a little bit more. If you want to learn a lot more about Phasma, get this book. Very good book. By the way, the new book coming out at the end of this month is also by Delilah Dawson. And did I say it, or did I get sidetracked? The new book is about Black Spire. In fact, it's called Black Spire. And everyone, I guess by now that loves Star Trek knows that Black Spire is the name of the town, village, whatever it is, that is Galaxy's Edge. And so the story has Black Spire, Galaxy's Edge as its backdrop. The book doesn't come out to the end of this month, so I really don't know what the story is about for it. But that is coming, and I'm looking forward to that. Okay, this is the only I really don't read the comic books, basically because you can't get these comic books in Finland. At least I don't know where to get them. I've looked and can't get them, and shipping stuff into the country is just too expensive, so I don't. But in 2017, when we were at Disney, and we were going through Star Tours, and went to the gift shop, they had this, and I had to pick it up. Star Wars C-3PO. And this comic book, and it's the only place to get the backstory, but this comic book tells you why C-3PO has the red arm that you see in The Force Awakens. Hi, I'm C-3PO. You probably didn't recognize me because of my red arm, but it is me. So this comic book will give you the whole story about where the red arm came from. So I'm including it here because this is canon, and explains a little something that was in the movie. Okay, next one is, of course, the novelization of The Force Awakens. I recommend reading this book because there's things in the book that aren't in the movie that tend to give some hints to some things. The one thing that you need to know when it comes to Disney canon, Disney says when it comes to the movies and the books, the movies take precedence. So there could be something in a book that's different than in the movie, so you have to believe the movie before you believe the book. But there's some added things here, like voices that Rey hears that you don't hear in the movie. And who are those voices? And who's talking to her? So, if you get a chance, another good book to read is Star Wars Force Awakens. A novel based on a very popular movie. Okay. I'm going to throw in one other book that's not, as I understand it, canon, although I think it should be canon. And that book is Star Wars: The Legends of Luke Skywalker. It comes down to this, my opinion. If you had read this book before seeing The Last Jedi, you probably would have understood the movie a little bit better. And that's my honest opinion on that. This book, the premise, you remember the little kids at the end of The Last Jedi who are all playing with the little toys, and the one little kid is telling the story of Luke Skywalker. and then the slave owner or whatever comes rushing into the room, and the kids scatter, and then the one boy goes outside to sweep and uses the force to pull the broom to him. It's that sort of an idea. I'm not sure if it's those same group of kids, although it may be, but it's a group of kids telling the stories that they've heard about Luke Skywalker. So the book is one of these things where there's a mixture of truth and embellishment with the stories. For instance, in The Last Jedi, when Luke Skywalker is fishing with that big long pole. Well, in this book, you find out how he learned to do that, to fish that way. You also learn why his right hand no longer has the synthetic skin on it, and why it's just the robot hand. You find out why that is in here. You find out a lot of things of Luke researching and trying to discover what it means to be a Jedi. And so I really recommend reading this book if you can. Again, I don't think it falls under canon. It's part of the Journey to Star Wars The Last Jedi collection of books. So it kind of tells you, hey, read this book before you go see The Last Jedi, because it's the journey to The Last Jedi. The Leia book that I had shown you earlier, I don't think you can see it down here anymore, but that book is also one of the Journey to the Star Wars, The Last Jedi books. So when these kind of books come out, buy them, read them. You're going to understand the movie a little bit better, I think. Okay, one last book to look at, and that is, of course, Star Wars The Last Jedi. And there were a few little clue things in here. One had to do with Luke's lightsaber, and it's only like one or two sentences. I'm not going to spoil it here for you, but there's something about Luke Skywalker's lightsaber in here. Just a couple sentences that makes you go, Yeah. So, I guess that brings us to the end of tonight's live stream. I've given you my opinion on why Leia is truly entitled to the title Princess. We've gone over the order of the movies. That is my preferred order for watching them. And we've gone through quite a list of the books. I would say this is probably only, I don't even know if it's half of the canonical books that are available. I'm not exactly sure. There's a lot of them here. I might have a little bit more than half. But there's a lot to read. And if you're a Star Wars fan and you like to read, you're going to get a lot more information from this. So, we have already gone the full hour. And so I don't want this to go any longer than it has. Thank you to everyone that stopped in and watched tonight. If you haven't yet, please click that thumbs up button. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. And with that said, I will leave you with two phrases. Find the magic wherever you are, and may the Force be with you. Good night, everybody. Thanks for stopping.